기다려주셔서 감사합니다. 이제 스페이스 시작할게요. Now we're gonna begin the space. We got all the speakers on the spot. 안녕하세요. 오늘 이 자리 참여해주셔서 감사합니다. 저는 크립토 번역공장이라는 채널을 운영하고 있는 험블맨이라고 합니다. 오늘 모신 세 분 모두 다 제아의 고수 느낌이라서 이런 공공적인 장소에 모습을 잘 드러내지 않으시거든요. 근데 오늘 정말 귀한 시간 내주셔서 다시 한번 감사의 말씀드립니다. 많이들 오늘 팟캐스트 기다리셨으니까 더 시간 끌 것 없이 바로 시작해볼까 하는데요. 그 전에 오늘 고수분들 아시는 분도 모르시는 분도 계실 테니까 일단 간단하게 자기소개 한번 들어볼게요. Hey Req, without further ado, we're gonna start the space. But before we begin, we'd like to get a brief introduction of yourself, please.
All right. Good evening for my Korean audience, I'd say, and for myself in EU time, it's just hit afternoon. But yeah, I'm Req. I've been trading, I would say, just over 4.5 years on primarily the DEXs. Not much of a centralized exchange trader, so I started out in BSC. Kind of got out my skills from grinding up. From there, I started with the equivalent of about $500. Had quite a good run trying to figure out everything for kind of my first year. Didn't make very much though. I would say I made about a couple $100,000, which I was lucky to. Back in the day, most people had no clue about what they were actually doing, and it was kind of a free for all. Most people they weren't bots back then really. Most people were just using PancakeSwap to buy. Things were a lot simpler compared to the landscape of these days, but I was definitely blessed to start back then because I had plenty of time to kind of understand the skills that would be needed to trade on these coins that I use even to this day. What I'm generally most known for, though, is trading on ETH, which I did between kind of the bear market of 2022 and the market of 2024 until the final ends of the year, which is where I made most of my profit. I think I was very, very good at ETH. I had a good understanding of projects before they dropped. I had a good knowledge of what would make a coin good over time. And I was relatively good at sniping as well, but not just sniping. Most of my profits were from buying coins post-launch, but I had a really good feel for the market for post-launch coins. Now I still trade on Solana, so I'm pretty active on Solana. And I mean, over time, and I was relatively good at sniping as well, but not just sniping. Most of my profits were from buying coins post-launch, but I had a really good feel for the market for post-launch coins. Now I still trade on Solana, so I'm pretty active on Solana, and I mean, over the last couple of months, it's been extremely profitable as well. But yeah, I've had a pretty good track run over the last 4 years. I'd say almost every single month since I started trading, I've been profitable, except for a couple odd months in here and there in the past markets, maybe in 2022, where things were extremely rough. But yeah, I think it's been a good run so far, and I'll be glad to share any information that I've gained through my journey.
Now we're gonna welcome the next speaker. 그 다음으로는 쿵님 자기소개 한번 해주실까요?
들리시죠?
네, 잘 들립니다.
네네. 저는 이제 졸업 CCTV라는 이제 동네 구멍가게 채널 하나 하고 있는 쿡이라고 하고요. 덱스는 이제 처음은 BSC에서 세이프문으로 처음 했던 것 같아요. 사실 저는 이제 소개를 길게 준비하지 않아가지고 민망하긴 한데 렉이 길게 해서 제가 주인공이 아니기 때문에, 그리고 대다수가 아마 이렇게 유 과장님하고 제 채널로 줬기 때문에 그냥 소개는 여기까지만 하도록 하겠습니다.
네네. 네, 안녕하세요. 그냥 채널 하나 운영하고 있고, 저는 처음에 한 2년 전부터 좀 집중적으로 코인 시작한 것 같은데, 처음에 한 2천만 원 대출받아서 크로노스 MMF라는 거가 있었는데, 거기 다 꼬라박았다가 다 날리고, 그러고서 다시 어떻게 덱스에서 계속 해보려고 비벼보다가 조금씩 벌고 있습니다. 요새는 좀 힘들기는 한데, 네, 일단은 그냥 여기까지만 하겠습니다. 네.
유 과장님 목소리 좀 평소 말씀하시는 거 약간 걸걸하실 줄 알았는데 되게 미성이셔가지고 의외네요. 알겠습니다. 그러면 감사합니다. 네. 일단 특히 이게 렉님이 한국에서는 별명이 덱스 천만대요. 잠시 렉님한테 한국에서 자신이 어떻게 불리는지, 그 뜻이 뭔지 진짜 설명 잠깐만 드릴게요.
네.
Req, so you saw the poster I made for today's podcast, right? do you know why you're in the position of sitting at the throne and you got those black wings on your back?
Actually, if you don't mind elaborating on that,
Exactly.
I did see it, but
Yeah. That's because you're called Chunma in Korea, and Chun means sky or heavenly, and Ma means devil. So it's like a devilish god. And it's Chinese kind of background fantasy stories. The Chunma is often referred as a final boss because he's like way too powerful by far anyone else. So when someone's like unarguably the best in something, it's used as a metaphor to refer to that person. So you're like a final of the final boss.
it's I don't mind it at all. Actually, I mean, I'm pretty big into the fantasy novels as well, so I like that.
형님도 별명이 마음에 드시는 것 같아서 다행이네요. 자, 그럼 이제 본격적으로 또 질문에 들어갈 건데요. 그 전에 어제 한 가지 알려드릴게요. 어제 창펑이 자기 개사진을 올리면서 이름을 안 밝혔거든요. 근데 오늘 혹시라도 라이브 중에 이름이 올라온다면 라이브는 잠시 중단하고 고수분들이 바로 거래하러 가셔야 돼가지고 그때 중단하고 거래가 좀 잦아들면은 라이브가 재개될 거라는 점. 처음 하는 것만큼 이름은 안 올려줬으면 좋겠네요. 이때만큼은. 일단은 그거 밝히면서 First question, as the authority of the host, I'd like to ask you, because the reason why you followed me and I got to contact you was because you liked and followed me through the whistleblowing of the Binance post. So I'd like to ask something regarding the Binance. So the circumstance we are at the moment, if Binance lists something, it just goes short. It just goes to the bottom, lockout bottoms. And also, like, what do you think of this kind of circumstances, what the Binance is doing? And seems like the CZ is pushing BSC chain pretty hard. Like, it's doing all the meme coins and some things like we have a runners as well. So do you think this is like a one-time thing or it continue as on for the rest of the year?
All right, yes. So regarding that, regarding the listing process of their coins, it's been really interesting recently. I mean, when they listed coins like Peanut and Act, I think that was when something shifted in their listing philosophy, where people started to be a bit more concerned about the coins that they listed. Like Peanut, you could say arguably was not that bad of a listing. There was some reasons why you could say that, yeah, I could see why they listed that. Act, on the other hand, felt pretty blatantly bad, and a lot of people were definitely dissatisfied with that listing. And since then, Binance has definitely had a lot more questionable listings. Now, most recently, they've listed Test. And because of that, and because of all the backlash that they got, I think CZ had to basically put out like a full-on explanation thread on the listing processes and how he doesn't have that much insight about how they choose kind of their own things to go for it. I think they tend to list for what they would provide the most volume in the short term, but sometimes the coins themselves are simply so bad that you can get away with immediately shorting the moment they listed on combined spot and futures, or the moment they're listed on just on futures, which generally doesn't bring as much volume, but just provides an exit because a lot of people have tokens, and the moment it's listed on Binance futures, you could tell a friend to tell a friend that, hey, I got a lot of tokens, you can get ready to short because I'm going to dump it all on Binance futures. So that's something that definitely happens a lot and may continue to happen. But I think Binance Spot is still definitely one of the strongest listings, probably second only to Upbit in terms of volume. As for the chain itself, I think it highly depends on what CZ does today and tomorrow. If he actually does go ahead and decide, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give the name of the dog, and this is his picture, and good luck trenching, then I think for the next couple of weeks we're gonna see a lot of volume on BSC. We're gonna see pretty good appreciation of BNB itself, probably to all-time high, which isn't even that far away. And we may see a lot of people moving over from different chains to try and get onto that volume. I mean, a lot of people bridged yesterday just off of the rumors. But if he decides that he may tease the launch for a bit longer or decides fully against dropping it, I think the volume on BSC will fizzle, and he knows that as well, which is why he may try and keep that going for a while. If he also teased in his last message that he might just start mentioning memes or supporting memes, and in the case he does that, that's kind of basically saying, hey, okay, I'm gonna just keep eyes on my chain for as much as possible, because I assume Binance and BNB is pretty jealous of the volume that Solana has had over the last couple of months. So they might be trying to claw that back.
그렇다면 다음 질문인데요. 저는 이제 제 질문을 했으니까 풍님 뭐 질문하고 싶으신 거 하나 해주시겠어요?
아, 네네. 일단 저는 가장 최근에 궁금했던 게 트럼프가 코인을 발행을 했는데 최근에 그때 뭐 어떻게 대응을 했는지 아니면 뭐 트럼프를 샀는지 아니면 뭐 베타를 샀는지 그게 제일 궁금했거든요.
Okay, that's a good question. Yes, I did trade Trump. I was very early to it. I would say my weakness on the trade was definitely sells. I did make quite a bit of money on Trump itself, but I definitely Melania a lot better. So my workflow when I saw Trump was, believe it or not, I was on Memescope at the time, and I think I saw maybe 10 or 15 Trump coins, and I was in VC with a bunch of other people, and I'm like, it's a bit odd that there's so many Trump coins coming out. What happened? And they were all on Memescope, so I thought maybe Trump must have posted some meme or something. And then I look at the Truth Social post, and it's just got like a picture of Trump. And then I look closer, and there's just a contract address on it. And I thought, well, that's a bit odd. Why is there a contract address, and why is it linked to this Get Trump meme? I check it, and I think when I saw that, the coin was trading at, I would say, 45 cents or something like that. It was relatively early. And I saw people from other groups trying to buy it at the same time. So I figured, okay, this is interesting, but maybe it's not going to be that good, because I was thinking of the previous Trump coins like DJT, RTR. Yeah, they did pretty well, but they didn't last very long. So I ended up going in anyway. I put in like, I would say maybe 2,000 or 3,000 SOL. And I think I got in maybe 45 cents to like 70 cents. And I wrote it up, but I think my biggest mistake was not understanding just how crazy it was, because all the way up I was scaling out. Of course, I had tokens all the way to the top, but it really took off too much too early. So I think that might possibly be the best coin that you could ever get. So you can't really beat yourself up for not understanding just how severe it was overplay in the moment. But staying exposed to the coin as a whole was definitely the best thing that I did. Understanding that, hey, okay, a lot of these coins allow you to just size all the way up. Like a lot of good traders on the coin didn't start buying it until $5, $10, $15, $20, $25, and still ended up making a lot of multiples. They just sized in. So I think you didn't have to be that early to the coin. I mean, a lot of people were extremely early, but sold extremely early as well. I think the best thing that I did that enabled me to make a lot on it was to be able to remember, yeah, I still have to stay exposed. This is arguably the most important person on planet Earth, and he posted a contract address, right? Outside of that, Melania, I traded a lot better because I was a lot more ready. I had more SOL in my wallet, and I was more alert for these kind of plays. And I think I made, I'd say, a factor of 2 times as more on that, despite the fact that overall it was not as good of a coin at all, but I still definitely played that better. Going forward, it kind of set another precedent as well for these coins that drop a meteor, that have high leg, etc. These coins end up being something you can size into, get your profits out, and generally not affected that much with price impact. But of course, now the market is kind of tapering down. A lot of people want to secure the profits that they have, and the coins are not doing as well. So we may end up seeing something that people are scared to hold on to and start taking profits earlier on, even though the narrative would be good enough for it to go a lot further. And I think a lot of people are going to regret it when that time comes, but that time might not be.
Thank you so much. 그 다음으로는 유 과장님 하나 질문해 주시겠어요?
네. 사전에 질문 모아가지고 보내놓은 대로 일단 순서대로 좀 질문을 해보겠습니다. 트럼프 나오고 나서 이제 트럼프가 계속 떨어지면서 이제 덱스 전체적으로 볼륨도 빠지고 최근에 장이 계속 안 좋은 추세였는데, 이게 작년 여름쯤이었죠. 그때가 진짜 꿈도 희망도 없는 그런 시장 상황이었던 걸로 기억을 하는데, 그렇게 이제 전체적으로 시장 볼륨 빠질 때, 그럴 때는 이제 평소랑 다르게 어떻게 대응을 하고 플레이를 하고 그러시는지 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
Yes, that's a good question. So when it comes to low volume markets, of course, the first and most important thing is preserving capital. But what I've noticed recently, at least over the last week of Solana, is there is volume, but the volume is obviously concentrated in 1 to 3 coins at a time, and the established runners tend to bleed a lot of volume. So how you tend to play these is, ideally you don't have a lot of established coins and you simply sit in a stable bag and just trade the new volume launches. So for instance, there was a car meme where the Central African Republic launched a coin. There was Jailstool. Quite recently, there was the Full Send coin, community coin. But a lot of these coins don't tend to retain their tops over a long period of time. You just need to hold these coins for less than 15 to 30 minutes after they initially gain traction. And after that, you need to essentially be ready to rotate into the next thing. The most important sign of an attention economy is how quickly the attention disappears when the market is shaky from even relatively good assets, where something may be fundamentally a good coin, but it's not a good time to hold the coin, and you could probably get in a lot cheaper. So a good example of that would be a lot of these coins in the AI meta, where they're fundamentally good coins, yet there's just so much bloat and there's so much action to be had that even a fundamentally good coin would not get the attention it needs. And you could be sitting holding the coin that you know is undervalued, but it will simply stay undervalued because nobody cares about it. So playing these markets, I would say the most important thing is to follow the wave. It's not good to be a contrarian when there's not much attention. If there's a market where there's a lot of attention, it is good to be a contrarian because it means you might be holding something that's missed, and people will start paying attention to it, and you could win a lot by sizing into those. But when things are slow, I would not say you want to size into things that often unless you're comfortable holding it until a shift of attention happens, and that could be weeks, it could be months. But if you're comfortable with that, then I guess you could size in, but primarily I would say play the wave, get into things that people are talking about, and get out while they're still talking about it.
That undervalue part hurts me personally because I'm holding the undervalued coins.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, I am too.
Req, okay, that was 2 questions from the 2 Korean traders. Now, I heard you got a question for the Koreans as well.
Yes, I'll start out with the first one. Just give me 1 second and I'll have that ready. Okay, so yeah, my biggest question for most people in the Korean community was, so at least in my community, an up-bid listing is basically as valued, if not more valued in terms of volume than Binance listing a coin. And I'm curious, like, what is it like trading on up-bid after a coin is listed? Is it something where you can get away with just buying the coin? Can you just, if you see like, oh, this coin got listed on up-bid, I can just buy and possibly scalp it and make money? So something that you look to buy after the initial candles, or is it something that you tend to avoid entirely? And outside of trading on up-bid, I'm not sure if you guys use any other exchanges as well, like, or is that not really common there?
We got a few like Bitthems and stuff. Yes, huge volume, but inevitably the up is being the biggest. So I think your question is on point. 하나씩 뭐부터 말씀해 주면 될 것 같아요.
네네. 일단은 업비트를 2020년도 아니면 2021년도랑은 지금 상황이 전혀 다른데, 그때는 상장한다는 공지가 뜨고 샀어도 꽤 먹여준 게 있었어요. 근데 지금은 사실 업비트나 빗썸은 거의 딸이라고 하는데, 김치 프리미엄을 노린 그런 시세 차익용으로 사용하는 거 말고는 업비트에서 트레이딩을 하는 경우는 아마 많지는 않을 거예요, 지금 한국인들도. 그래서 뭐 업비트나 빗썸은 거의 뭐 덱스 하는 사람들한테는 그냥 이제 돈을 원화로 바꾸기 위한 은행 정도로만 쓰는 것 같아요.
유 과장님 여기 더 할 거 있으세요? 아니면
저도 이제 쿡이랑 똑같이 거의 덱스만 하는 사람이니까 여기도 그냥 원화를 이제 카지노 칩으로 바꾸기 위한 그냥 은행 정도로 사용하고 있는데, 근데 이제 덱스 플레이어들 말고 보통 이제 아비트라지 위주로 하시는 분들은 저는 자세히는 모르지만 이제 오피트를 쓸 수 있다는 이제 한국 국적의 사람이라는 게 되게 생각보다 엄청 프리미엄인 것 같고, 그리고 제일 좋은 거는 업비트도 쓸 수 있고 코인베이스도 쓸 수 있는 이제 이중 국적자. 이 사람들이 뭐 한 1년에 한 두세 번 정도 기회가 있을 것 같은데 그 다른 데는 이제 출금 다 막히고 코인베이스만 이제 되는데 프리미엄 엄청 길게 유지되는 그런 상황이 한 번씩 있거든요. 그럴 때는 이제 거기서 퍼와가지고 업비트에 갖다 팔면은 이제 돈이 복사가 되는 그런 상황도 나오고 그러는데 그래서 이제 아비트러지 유저들은 이제 계속 사용을 할 텐데 저희 같은 이제 덱스충들은 사실 이제 업비트에 상장을 한다고 해서 바로 글등가 이러는 경우는 이제 거의 없어가지고 여기에 대해서는 뭐 맛있는 답변을 드리기는 좀 애매한 것 같네요. 네, 이상입니다.
충분히 맛있었습니다. 감사합니다.
So for the exchanges, since you said up it, the listing doesn't matter that much now. Is there any that does matter that is centralized to Korea, or is it just the big exchanges like Coinbase, Binance, etc. that matters in
Alright.
terms of spot listings?
근데 요즘에는 사실 빗썸이 제일 빨리 하려고는 하는데 그마저도 이다고 생각을 하고요. 한국에서 스팟으로 뭔가를 수익을 내기에는 뭐 덱스를 하는 사람 입장에서 보면 정말 느려 보이지 않나 그렇게 생각하고 있어요.
이게 그 업비트 현물 상장이 의미가 없다고 하는 게 저희는 이제 맨날 덱스에서만 거래를 하니까 업비트 현물로 올라가는 코인들을 저희가 평소에 사고 팔고 할 일이 잘 없거든요. 근데 대신에 이제 밈코인이라든가 그런 게 이제 업비트 스팟으로 올라갈 경우에는 약간 얘기가 다른데 전에 이제 업비트 페페 상장했을 때 그 페페마저도 덱스든 어디든 딴 데서 가지고 와서 업비트에 갖다 팔면은 이제 거의 꼭대기에 팔면 2배 정도 나왔었을 것 같은데 그런 경우에는 저희한테도 이제 의미가 있죠. 근데 그런 거 말고 이제 그냥 베라체인이라든지 그냥 레이어 원 이런 코인들 같은 경우에는 사실 별로 크게 신경은 안 쓰는 것 같아요. 네, 이상입니다.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think most of the money in these kind of plays, especially in this kind of market, is just by shorting the listings of almost every new listing that comes out on the place. But personally, I try to stay away from futures if possible. So yeah, that's something that I generally don't do. So I think you can go to the next one, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
네네 이제 요즘은 아니고 좀 예전에 펌프펀이 생기고 난 뒤로 같은 맵을 가지고 이제 PVP가 너무 심하게 일어나는데 그럴 때 이제 뭐 이제 러너가 정해질 때까지 지켜보는지 아니면 뭐 어느 쪽에 근거를 가지고 먼저 베팅을 하는지 그걸 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
All right, that's a good question. On Pump specifically, try to see who's buying or who wants to buy or who has already bought. So, for instance, a lot of members of Grand tend to have a lot of pull when a coin is newly launched. For instance, someone like Powell or someone like Requi tends to have a lot of copy traders when they buy as well. And they tend to bring a lot more eyes to a specific contract, or they tend to make it seem more valid when people are trading it. And from what I've seen is there's two schools of thought basically. A is you always trade the first one that comes out. So whether that is the first one that migrates off of fund or the first one that does well, first one that hits a mill, or the first one that's deployed or whatever. And you simply run with that and hope that that's the one that works. Works about 50% of the time, but it's not that consistent. Second is you simply keep buying the one that's winning and hope it continues winning, but it's also not always the case. So I try to hedge my bets. I try to buy both of them. I think I have the capital to be able to do so. And I would just ride the other one to zero. So I try to, but if there's too many, generally the PvP tends to fizzle out after like 3 or 4. So I try to just get in as many as possible. But if there's way too many, I'll try to just go with the first one or the one with the most notable people in it. I think that's a good question, seeing as we're going to have the whole stuff with easy. In that case, I think I'm going to be basically buying as many as possible. And once there's one that seems to have eclipsed the rest, so it's like trading at a multiple 2 or 3, from the one that's closest to it, I'm going to most likely start sizing into that one, assuming that I haven't already bought it. So ideally, in a good world, I would have already bought it at a lower market cap. But of course, it's really impossible, not really feasible to be able to do something like that. And you can usually get more multiples by then, just disregarding the rest and focusing on the one that's the highest. Of course, you have the possibility that if it gets vamped, you do lose all your money. But more often than not, the one that's either first, so in this case, it would be if it's off 4.me, the first deploy, you generally will always have people who, even if it's not the highest at the time, the first deploy will always be the one that gets the most attention over time. I mean, you could see something like Nero as an example. CTO Nero was one of the first deploys, although actually I don't think it was the very first one. I think it was the second one. But over time, most people decided that, yeah, that's the community one, even though there was a Nero a couple hours down the line that went to like 100 or 200 mil, while the other CTO Nero was still at 5 mil. Over time, you have more people that would support it simply because they think that the first token is the most legitimate.
What a perfect answer.
네. 그 덱스 플레이라는 거를 그냥 진짜 단순하게 두 개로 나눈다고 하면 이제 실시간으로 뭐 일이 갑자기 생겨서 대응을 해야 되는 경우가 하나 있을 거고, 아니면 사전에 어떤 프로젝트가 빌딩이 되고 있는데 그 정보를 미리 인지하고 있다가 걔네가 나오면 이제 빠르게 들어가는 이런 두 종류 플레이로 나눌 수 있다고 생각을 하는데, 저 개인적으로는 이제 RQ 지갑 같은 거를 많이 이제 찾아봐가지고 지난 한 1년 반 정도 거의 모든 트랜잭션 다 봤던 것 같은데, 그 코인 중에 인셉트라던가 아니면 브루메라든가 다 이더리움에서 나온 토큰들이었는데, 이런 거를 거의 첫 번째 아니면 두 번째 정도로 이제 들어갔던 것 같아요, RQ가. 근데 이런 거 같은 경우에는 이 프로젝트들이 어떤 애들이고 얘네들이 이때쯤에 런칭을 할 거고 어떤 종류의 뭐 토크노믹스를 가지고 있던가 이런 거를 사전에 다 알고 인지를 하고 있는 상태여야 그렇게 플레이가 가능하다고 생각을 하는데, 그런 식으로 이제 플레이를 하기 위해서 정보를 수집하는 시스템을 따로 어떤 식으로 구축을 해놨는지, 그리고 어떤 방식으로 프로젝트 정보를 습득을 하는지 그런 거를 좀 물어보고 싶습니다.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can start with Incept, since that was a really good one in general. So back in one thing I'll say that differentiates how EVM was just a year ago as to what Solana is now, it was a lot more methodical, I would say. There was not as much need to act immediately as there is in Solana now. I mean, on Sol, there is very little pre-launch information in terms of getting coins, at least on Pumpfun. If it is, then it's definitely a larger launch, for instance, something that's on Meteora and it was a time drop, or something that is a hyped coin, maybe a CDFI idea or something like that. But ETH, a lot more methodical, a lot slower, definitely have plenty of time ahead of time to look at things. So in the case of Incept, I saw the contract on mainnet. I tracked all the contracts that deployed in ETH, and I looked at every single one. And I had a workflow where I could compare a contract to a similar contract that has been deployed on a testnet. What you're looking for in that case is, in the testnet, how many times did they test? What did they test for? And what was the wallet that was connected to those wallets that were doing tests? How many times did they test, and what was it looking like? Did they verify? Because a lot of times on ETH, they wouldn't verify a contract on the mainnet, but during their testing, they may have slipped up and verified the contract on their tests, and you can kind of get a feel for what exactly they were going for. Outside of that, I had to, of course, find the socials, which was, of course, not as simple. We just had Incept, but I could scrape all the domains, and I believe the domain was something like incept.build or something like that. And that was off of the tail end of the 404 meta, which was started by Pandora and all of those 404 coins. And this was kind of settling down. The 404 meta had ended, but this was kind of a unique take on it. and it seemed relatively interesting. They had a white paper that was already readily available on the website, which did make it a bit easier because the white paper lined up with the contracts that I saw the tests of, and the tests were verified. Now, once you kind of know that, okay, there's a pretty high chance that this contract that I'm looking at is legit, you have to use, of course, a wallet tracker in that case to keep up with all the transactions of the dev wallet before exactly when he's going to do things. Most likely in the test, there's chances that they've added liquidity to a DEX on the testnet chain already, and you generally know that they're going to mimic their actions on the mainnet. So if he needs to whitelist a certain wallet, if he needs to reduce the taxes, if he needs to add liquidity to Uniswap v3 instead of Uniswap v2, etc., you always be prepared for this kind of stuff. There is the case where sometimes they do test on the testnet and then switch things up on mainnet, but it's a lot rarer. It's a lot more often that they don't change that. So I was roughly prepared for what he was going to do, but there was a bit of a hiccup actually when Incept went live, if I remember correctly. I was trying to buy using Banana, and the contract wasn't working. Like, it didn't let me buy, but it actually allowed me to purchase through Maestro, and allowed me to buy like a larger amount when the coin dropped. And a lot of people were not really ready for that drop, and they were blindsided by the fact that it wasn't purchasable at launch until it moved to a higher market cap. One thing that I will say about ETH is that it favors a lot of slow preparation. I would liken it to being a snake in the grass and waiting for an unsuspecting prey. And I would liken Solana to being in a fast-moving car that never stops, and you have to react to obstacles in real time. As for Broom, that was actually something that I saw the moment it went live. I did not have any context on it beforehand. But one thing I do have is that I check also not just the contracts, but also the new liquidity ads, or I check the new liquidity ads specifically on Uniswap v3, as they have a lower scam rate than Uniswap v2, and they were just less spammy in general. Once I checked and saw, okay, there's a relatively large amount of liquidity, and there were very few buyers, like 1 or 2 buyers. I checked, okay, the funding is the most important, and it was funded, I believe, by a multi-sig, and that multi-sig was connected to a juice box pre-sale. And the moment I saw that and realized that not many people had contributed to that sale, and the sale was multiple years old, I bought the launch, and I believe I sold a lot very quick. Some of the pre-sellers who had tokens had just immediately started selling. Then I went back, looked for the tokenomics, looked at the general information for the coin itself, bought back some more once I realized that the pre-sellers don't have that much. It was a lot of immediately obvious contextual analysis, I would say. You have to be ready and on your feet, even on ETH, even though most of the time you don't have to. I think one important thing is that I'm good with reading block explorers. I've gotten used to SoulScan as well by now, but thinking on the feet, knowing when to sell or take profit on kind of coins is simply when the attention has reached a peak, right? So in terms of Broom, I noticed that a lot of people were very confident it was going to go higher. And when a lot of people are saying that this is an obvious trade, you need to be ready and see just how obvious a trade is supposed to be. Because one thing I've noticed is that the obvious trades generally do not do that well, because everybody is shoehorned into thinking that, yeah, this is going to be the one, this is going to be a successful one. And they are blindsided to any sort of thing that might divert from that. And then they become disillusioned when the coin doesn't perform as they expect it to. So I think hated rallies and love descents are very, very true things in this market, and you should be ready in the case of being in the coin with the attention, but not necessarily trading it as other people do. So yeah, my benefit on ETH and I guess EVM chains in general is that it's a lot more feasible to be able to check all the contracts. It's a lot more feasible to be able to find something because it doesn't immediately go live after it's created, as compared to something like Pumpfun, where you see it, it's live, then you have to start your information flow, then you have to start looking around for everything, and you're obviously competing against a lot of these FNS that have 15, 20, 25 people sitting in the voice chat, passing out information, shouting out calls, etc. So that's definitely why I think I excelled in that area as well, because with the people that I worked with, we would tend to find a lot of these things ahead of time. We'd be able to find the context of them before the coins went live and set out a strategy of how hard to go on the coin in general, things like that. And that means that you kind of set out a game plan and you just watch it work out for you as things happen.
Thank you so much. That was so insightful. 제가 이거에 이어서 하나 질문해 볼게요. I was gonna give you a question to Liu and Cook, but this actually raised a question for me as well. You were talking about how you have like a group of people, we all know, and the people have this VC all the time, talk about what to do and what I'm gonna do. Like you mentioned this a bit briefly on your Roadies interview. I watched it like 100 times, but as an individual like me, you know, not like KOLs, not an influencer, not a whale, what is the best course of action for me to be in a actual like helpful group?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are Discords that cater to it, either with smaller passes or just being completely open to the public. One Discord that I always recommend my friends is Cryptic Discord, because it's public and it's a good starting point. Generally from there, people have their offshoots, they have their private groups wherever they go to after that. But it's a starting point for a lot of people because they bounce off information. There's a lot of people, they're generally early to things, and you can get a feel for what it's like in a position where there's a lot of information. Because I think the biggest problem of either not having any sort of support base or not having any private group or any place to be in is that you miss out on a lot of context on coins that are very good. So for instance, you might be trading something and you sell because you didn't see a specific tweet from someone else, or you decide to buy something because you didn't understand that something else is going to happen. And with that additional context, with those additional people, I think you understand trades better, you understand context better as well. You'll be able to be a bit more nuanced in your trades. And I think with that, you'll be able to be a bit more successful. I do know that a lot of the groups now tend to gatekeep. They don't really want to lose their edge by having too many people in. So usually my suggestion is start out with somewhere like Cryptic, somewhere like DigiWorld, although it has a pass, which or an NFT I believe you have to buy. But once you're in those groups, if you're active enough, and if you're likable, if you're a good grinder, if people generally find you favorable, you will find your way into private groups after that. I find most people to be receptive if you just message them.
Alrighty. Okay. Now we got a question. You can question Liu and Cook this time.
Yes, no problem. I'll get to my second one. Give me 1 second. Okay, so outside of myself, of course, are there any other traders that you guys find interesting in the current market who have adapted really well to either the PvP nature of the market, or traded the AI meta really well, and or traded Trump and Melania very well and kept their profits really, really safe? Or the people who are really good and up and coming right now, who you think have a lot of potential? Or is there someone that you're like looking at as a good trader at the moment?
이번에는 렉님이 쿵님과 류 과장님께 질문을 드리는 겁니다. 여러분, 근데 잠깐만요. 이거 타이밍이 잠깐만요. 그 샹뽕이 마이너스로 올렸네요. Wait, we got a tweet from XCG. Okay, I called it. Okay, I jinxed it.
Yes, exactly. So
we'll post
that's
it
gonna be
in 3 hours, 8 p.m.-ish Dubai time. When did he post it? Okay. Okay. It's 3 hours.
3 hours. We have
Is
time.
that okay? Will he just one line and just by posting an hour? He wouldn't do that, would he?
I don't think so.
Okay.
If he does,
다행이네요.
then we will have a temporary break.
오케이. 다행이네요. 지금 트위터를 확인했는데 샹뽕이 3시간 뒤에 자기 개 사진 올리겠다고 올라와가지고 참 다행입니다. 이게 그 전에 끝날 거기 때문에. 근데 혹시라도 그 전에 올린다고 한다면은 저희는 잠시 휴식을 가져야 될 것 같아요. 지금 이걸 하고 있는 와중에도 바로 이렇게 확인을 하시는 게 참 대단한 것 같아요. 저도. 지금 한 질문에 답 주시고, 지금 이런 사건이 발생했기 때문에 제가 질문사항이 하나 또 생겼거든요. 그래서 지금 주시하고 계시는, 관심 갖고 계시는 트레이더 있으시면 답변 부탁드립니다.
요즘에는 뭐 잘하는 그 애들이 너무 많지만 프로핏이 제일 빠른 것 같거든요. EVM도 그렇고 솔족도 그렇고 뭐 들어가려고 그러면 프로핏이 거의 들어가 있더라고요. 그래가지고 저는 뭐 그 한 명, 뭐 여러 명 더 있긴 하지만은 그 한 명이 저는 제일 눈여겨보고 있는 것 같아요.
저도 프로핏도 많이 보고, 그리고 P&L 리더라고 있는데, 걔도 진짜 잘하는 것 같고, 그리고 한국에서는 글쎄 한 10월 말 11월 이때까지는 저도 좀 친다고 생각했었는데 12월 솔라나장에서는 이제 한국 한정으로는 쿡이 제일 잘했던 것 같고, 그리고 또 누가 있을까? 음, 포도 이제 계속 어떤 액션 하고 있는지는 라이브로 계속 다 보고 있는데, 이제 포식 배팅 스타일이 이제 11월, 12월 같이 이제 엄청 장 좋을 때는 진짜 말도 안 되게 돈 벌 수 있는 그런 스타일인 것 같은데, 그게 아니고서 요즘처럼 좀 볼륨 빠지고 이럴 때는 또 말도 안 되는 속도로 돈을 잃어버릴 수도 있는 그런 방법 같아가지고, 좀 본인 스스로 이제 좀 판단을 잘 해야 될 것 같다라는 생각이 들어요. 일단은 뭐 그 정도.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think what's interesting is generally in our circle, the people that we look at as good traders are similarly the traders that you look at as good, which I find pretty interesting. But I think, yeah, I can answer another one for you.
I was just questioning because
Oh, right.
it was the question for myself, not from the pre-questions. Cook was posting about the Binance's CZ split, and we're on the last phase. I'm not like a top player like you are. I'm just an ordinary person, just like most of the people in the audiences. What do you guys do? Like you're literally speaking right now. Do you have another monitor that keep on refreshing tweets, looking at the CJ's post? How do you keep on track with millions and millions of posts?
Okay, so I do have a Twitter monitor that I have going all the time. I saw the post the moment it went live, and I was keeping an eye. I'm also, I have an ultra wide monitor, so I have this podcast going on in the middle, but on both other sides, I have Telegram and Discord open, and I kind of just keep alert with all that that's going on. I feel with even what CZ has done now, there is the possibility that he may not post the dog at all, and he's doing it for attention. But in the case that he actually does, I feel like it's going to be extremely chaotic. I feel like you would need to focus on it completely, and it may be a lot worse than people are expecting it to be. The coin itself will do very good, don't get me wrong, but it may be very, very hard to get into that at any given point in time. Because if you think about it, people will be pricing this against Test, and Test went to like 450, 500 million market cap, and this is of course the Binance Founders dog. It is a lot more notable than a test coin. It could possibly become the mascot of Binance itself. People will be pricing it accordingly very quickly, and it will be extremely messy. So my advice would be, I think the coin will go up very quickly, and then it will go down before it truly gets most of the attention. And there may be multiple coins trading above 15, 20, 30 mil. There may also be teams or people professional teams who launch coins who will not be ready the second CZ tweets, and they may launch a couple hours later on. And once that happens, it's going to be a lot of chaos. We may see something like Nero again, but instead of 5 or 10 contracts like we saw in EVM, we're going to see 50 to 100 contracts on BNB. So at that point, you may choose to just buy the highest one, buy the first one, or just wait for the initial candle to go up or down, because I can honestly see a candle to over 100 mil on whatever the real one will be, whatever the first one will be. But one thing about these coins is they don't go up forever, and they don't go up for a long time. They tend to go up a lot very quickly, and then there's an initial dip, and that is where you can decide to take the trade if you so wish.
이거 질문은 그 바로 어떻게 알 수 있냐라는 질문은 유 과장님하고 쿵님한테도 좀 여쭤보고 싶어요. 트위터 지금 스페이스 하고 계신데 두 분도 옆에 모니터 띄워놓고서 뭐 알람 받고 계신 건가요?
네. 지금은 본부장이니까 BNB 채널이랑 CZ 트윗은 올라오자마자 볼 수 있게 따로 텔레그램 정 하나 띄워놨고요. 이제 혹도 저랑 아예 똑같은 거 보고 있을 것 같은데 아마 그렇지 않아요?
Yes. 일단은 그 트위터 알림복 같은 거 다 설정을 해두고 뭐 남한테 전해드는 것보다 본인 직접 보는 게 제일 빠르니까 그런 걸 세팅해두는 게 좋을 것 같아요. 근데 그게 뭐 처음에 살 때는 비싸다고 생각할 수도 있는데 그게 뭐 1억을 벌어줄 수도 있고 10억을 벌어줄 수도 있어서 그런 봇들은 무조건 활용하는 게 좋을 것 같습니다.
Yes, yes. I think it is useful. There definitely are more affordable options as well, but come with a very short delay. But I think it's worth it. I think it's definitely worth it. Information flow is definitely the most important thing. Having access to tweets as soon as they come is the most important when it comes to news plays, especially these narrative plays. Even if it's 1 to 2 seconds where you know the dog's name is something else, that is 1 to 2 seconds where you'll be faster than someone else, and it could actually save you, in fact, the entire amount that you paid for your Twitter notification. So I think it's a very important thing to have.
I don't know if I can ask you this, but are you currently holding any meme coins?
No, yeah, it's perfectly fine to ask. I am actually not holding any meme coins at the moment. No, I have a very well. I guess I have one. I have a very small position in Pengu, but to be honest, I wish I didn't have it. But yeah, I think I had a very good time where I exited a large amount of my position and moved to USDC. So it was around the time after I took my trade with Graphane, and I exited a lot around 300 to 400 mil. At the time, I felt like there was just a bit too much excitement in the market, and I sold almost, I would say, maybe 60 to 70% of my positions, and I also sold a lot of my Solana at the time, and went to USDC. And I think at this time I'm like almost 75 to 80% in stables at the moment. So at the moment, I kind of just want to play the rotations. For instance, the meme that I would want to be in is CZ's dog, assuming he tweets the name. That is where all my exposure will be until the next thing happens. And my time frame for holding that would just be a couple of days, over to maybe a week or two if I can get into the right one. I think that's all you need. Outside of that, this isn't the market to be holding memes unless it is feasible to sell it now, which means that it's probably down a lot. Of course, there are a lot of meme traders who are trying to revive their bags, but every single day, as more and more memes launch, it becomes less and less feasible to be in a meme where there may be a smaller community over time. So I think it's important to just trade these things and not get attached to any of them.
저는 이제 그 덱스 특성상 컴퓨터 앞에 되게 오래 앉아 있어야 되는데 뭐 밖에 있어도 핸드폰을 봐야 되는 시간이 되게 길고 저 같은 경우는 이제 뭐 트럼프 때처럼 불장이 오면은 거의 밖에 안 나갔거든요. 그냥 이제 집에서 밖에 있고 잠도 최대한 줄이고 했었는데 근데 이제 평상시에 이렇게 본인은 덱스에 시간을 얼마나 투자하는지 뭐 잠도 얼마 못 잘 것 같긴 한데 물어보고 싶습니다.
That's a good question. Not enough. I'd say. I think on a normal day where you can say the market is relatively active, I think anywhere with 12 to 16 hours at the desk, either trading on meme scope, looking at contracts, going through Twitter, getting wallets, whatever it may be. I think when it slowed down over the last couple of weeks, like I said, the last 2 to 3 weeks, I would say I cut that in half. So it would be anything between like 6-10 hours. And during it, the time as well matters a lot. So in my time zone, the early morning UTC is not a good time to trade, especially on Solana. Most of the time, the evening UTC, specific mostly when the Asian market is open or when people from China are trading, it tends to be a lot better. And also the evening UTC means that people from the American market as well are also awake, and it's just the early afternoon for them. And that's another time that tends to be good. So my sleep schedule is all over the place. I tend to sleep very, very early in the morning and then wake up early in the afternoon. But it tends to be a long grind, like 12 to 16, sometimes more than 16 hours, depending on the day. It can get very crazy, yeah.
질문
이건 되게 그냥 짧은 질문 하나 해보고 싶은데, 나중에 본인 장례식에서 틀고 싶을 만큼 진짜 완벽했던 트레이드 하나 꼽는다면 어떤 게 있을까요?
Okay. Would definitely be on ETH, and there was a specific coin. So, firstly, my most profitable play ever was Melania, for sure. Like it was almost 8 figures in USD that I made just off of Melania. But I wouldn't say that I traded Melania as well as I could have. But there were other coins where I made less money, but I feel like I traded it better, and those were primarily on EVM. I'm trying to think of one that I definitely played the best. Honestly, even okay, to this day, it may have been a coin on the Binance Smart Chain that I traded it back in like 2021 or so. And it was a very, very outsized portion of my portfolio at the time. I think my total profit on the coin was like 100K. Trying to find the name, but I remember that I think my total portfolio at the time was maybe 150K. And I had I was generally DJing with like 1 to 2 BNB per play. And I had put in 1 BNB into a coin. And for whatever reason, I usually tend to sell things very to get at least my initials out and then hold the rest to ride the profit. But something in my mind told me to hold. And I think I held it right until when my bag was $100,000. So that in size of my port was almost like 60-70% of my portfolio. And the day it hit 100,000, I decided that I was going to sell the coin. And I think not that long after I sold, the coin rug. And this was over a period of maybe 2 weeks that I was holding the coin. And I kept holding it all the way up. And I sold possibly at the pico top of the coin. And after that, I think that something about that changed how I thought about crypto, because I felt like it was possible to make so much more in the space after I made that trade. Like after I traded that, I think I became more optimistic about trading crypto as a whole. So I think that is my most important trade.
That's so funny. Okay, time really flies when you're having a good time. It's 1.5 hours already. Okay, may I invite you to ask one more question to Cook and Liu?
Yes, of course. Let me get my final question out. Okay, yeah. Have you, any of you, at a point while trading that you decided or thought that maybe it was better to quit trading and go back to like a normal job, like a 9 to 5? And after being in that position, how did you guys recover or like get out of it?
Thanks for asking that. I really needed that. Okay.
뭐 당연히 그런 생각을 안 해본 건 아닌데 처음에 뭐 시드를 정말 거의 다 잃었을 때만큼 크게 잃었을 때는 하루 정도는 그런 생각이 들긴 해요. 근데 알다시피 덱스 플레이어들은 뇌가 다 망가져 있어가지고 다음날 되면 또 까먹거든요. 그래서 자연스럽게 덱스를 하게 되는데, 그래서 그런 생각은 해보긴 해봤는데 딱 하루 정도 가고, 그리고 재정비를 하고 다시 덱스를 했을 때 그 수익이 얼마나 큰지를 알고 있기 때문에, 그래가지고 당일에 힘들 때 그때 빼고는 안 하는 것 같습니다.
저는 이제 소위 말하는 퇴학이라고 하죠. 그거를 한 2번 정도 당해본 것 같은데, 그때 맨 처음에 코인 시작할 때 2천만 원 대출 받아가지고 가지고 온 거 그거 MMF라는 걸로 다 날리고, 그리고 작년 초쯤에 이제 판도라 막 나오고 403 메타일 때 돈 꽤 많이 벌었었는데, 뭐 그러다가 이제 장 안 좋아지면서 계속 이상한 플레이 하고 하다가 보니까 작년 9월쯤에는 전 재산이 한 2억 정도였거든요. 근데 지금은 뭐 그래도 어떻게 좀 괜찮게 되기는 했는데, 근데 그렇게 파산하고 할 때도 사실 뭐 성격이 크게 걱정을 안 하는 스타일이라서 그런 것도 있기는 한 것 같은데 맨날 이제 뭐 몇만 퍼센트씩 오르는 하루에 한두 개씩 나오는 게 덱스장이다 보니까 내가 돈이 아무리 없다고 해도 뭐 일발 역전이 가능한 곳이기도 하고 여기만큼 이제 경험으로 돈을 벌 수 있는 데가 없다고 생각을 해서 뭐 쌓여 있는 경험치 가지고 계속 하다 보면은 좀 더 이제 완벽하게 플레이할 수 있지 않을까라는 생각이 계속 들기도 하고 뭐 그렇습니다. 그 프로핏이 한 말 중에 그 뭐 한 번에 다 잃어버릴 수 있을 거를 알 정도로 겸손하면서도 한 번에 다 복구할 수 있을 정도로 이제 자신감이 있다. 그런 식의 말을 했던 것 같은데 뭐 그런 식으로 이제 마인드셋 가지고 있는 것 같아요. 그리고 사실 뭐 풀타임이 아니긴 합니다. 제가 회사를 다니고 있어요, 지금. 네, 이상입니다.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, I think that's a good mindset to have, especially if you have confidence in yourself to be able to make that back. And I feel like this is the one space where the opportunities never end. Yes, there may be cycles where things slow down. Yes, there may be cycles where it looks like it is over, but it's not. It never is. These things don't last forever. And I think one thing that has definitely changed just how normalized crypto is as a whole. Just trading coins, making coins, Pumpfun, things like that have become so much more normalized compared to how things were in 2022, where we were having very, very few coins, very little activity. There was a lot of instability and uncertainty in the market. Now, even if the prices go down, I feel like there will always be a core subset of people who will keep gambling, keep trading, keep going at the market just because they know that even the down days won't last forever. So that's my one advice to people, that if your bankroll isn't very big, make sure you're playing in the conditions that are the most suitable for it. Make sure that you're trading in the conditions where you have the highest chance to make good money, and only go in the coins where you are guaranteed, well, I wouldn't say guaranteed, but most likely to be able to make them successful.
뭐 마지막 질문해 주시죠.
네, 이거는 저 같은 그룹에 있는 친구가 좀 질문 하나 하고 싶다고 해서 대신 질문하고 싶은데요. 그 단일 트레이드에서 가장 큰 손실을 본 게 언제이고 어떤 코인에서 얼마를 잃었는지 알려줄 수 있냐? 그리고 그렇게 된 이후에 어떻게 대처했느냐? 이렇게 질문 드리고 싶습니다.
So that's actually a good question, because it's pretty recent, actually. The biggest loss I think I have on a coin is in Pengu. I think it's like, I'd say maybe it's like 1.6 million US dollars or so.
Holy shit.
It's mostly because I took a leverage position not too far from the bottom, and I actually thought I was going to get liquidated during that major dump a couple days ago, where ETH flash dumped to like 2,100, etc. But I didn't. So I had my position open, and I think I need the price to go up by not that much to break even, because the position size is so large. But I think one thing I learned from that is that leverage is definitely a slippery slope. It is very useful for things that are generally short trades. I think I would be a better shorter than I am longing assets, unless the long is very straightforward and has a clean thesis. But no, I would say that I don't have to trade leverage to make good money, and I think it was kind of a calculated gamble, because I was already loss of my Pengu bag, and I decided to sell it and then flip into a long. But who knows? Maybe the loss won't stay as a loss. It depends how the market goes from here. It could also get worse. But yeah, that's currently it. Yeah.
Wait, so you're still holding the position, so it doesn't mean that loss
Yes.
is not realized.
It's not realized. No, my biggest realized loss is not that big. I think my biggest unrealized losses are coins that I'm still holding, simply because I don't want to realize the loss. I think I'm down. I was down a bit on Colt as well, mainly because I was DCing on the way down, and ETH lost a lot of attention. Maybe I would say 700,000 or so, but it bounced a lot, and I was able to kind of get out of most of my position there. outside of that, I tend not to make many losses. I think I am very conservative as a trader, and thankfully, something like that coin, even the Pengu loss, is something that's not that big of a loss for me now, so I can weather the storm. But even then, day-to-day trading, I still get annoyed if I lose even a 5,000, which is a very, very little amount of my portfolio at this moment. But I think it's a good mindset to have, where even you can't just write off the small losses, because of course they add up over time, and you gotta keep you can't just ignore the small wins as well, because they add up. I wasn't the type of trader that makes all their money off of a single play, off of 2 single plays. Most of my money is simply by adding up over weeks, months, making a lot of trades, and being consistent in that regard. So thankfully, I don't take too many crazy risks, and I don't lose much because of it.
That's something that I need to learn. Thank you. Yeah.
네네. 근데 저도 사실 물어보려고 했던 마지막 질문을 과장님이 대신 해주셔가지고, 그래서 뭐 가장 이제 도움될 만한 당장 2시간 뒤에 있는 CJ의 코인을 아마 다들 하실 때, 뭐 그러니까 REQ는 봇을 뭘 쓰는지 하고, 뭐 약간 그런 거를 물어보고 싶었거든요. 근데 사실 아까 상펑이 코인을 걔 사진을 올렸을 때 어떻게 대처할지는 다 알려줘가지고, 그래서 그냥 지금은 봇을 뭐 쓰는지만 좀 묻고 싶습니다. 바나나는 분부를 지원을 안 하기 때문에. 네네.
So the quick last question was, you told about the course of action you will do when the CG posted the photo of the dog. So I guess that kind of answers itself. So we'd like to ask you, what kind of bot do you use? On EVM, you use Banana. So I think you answered Photon on the Rowdy's interview. And
Yes.
what about the BNB? What do you use?
Okay, so on BNB at the moment, I'm using Maestro simply because that is what I used to use before Banana, and I'm kind of familiar with the user interface. It is not for everyone, I would say. The UI does take some getting used to, but it does allow buying inside of the curve for 4.meme and also for the Pancake Swap Springboard. And I have it all customized and ready. So if needed, I can send a link for it, but Maestro does seem to be all round pretty good for that sort of stuff. And then as for my workflow for actually buying it, the first thing I'm going to do most likely is I'm going to head on to 4.meme. And if he posts, well, there's 2 things, right? He may post just a picture of the dog, but he may not post the name immediately. If he does that, then it's a lot more difficult. But if he posts just the name and also the picture together, then I'm going to head on to 4.meme as soon as, immediately, and just buy every single one with that name. There may be many, like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So I'll try to get the first one. The first one that deploys will be the most important one. You can filter the 4.meme by time. I think many people will be doing that after the coin goes live to see what was the one, and they would start buying that. So I'm going to most likely size into the first one the most, buy a couple more. This is going to be within a 1 to 2 minute time frame, as many as I can buy, and then I'm going to just head on to DEX Screener and see the ones that are at the top and just buy all of them. And this is the case where it's a name that's a new name. If it's an old name, it does make it less interesting because it may be one of the coins that are already trading very high. It also may be the case that there's a coin that already exists on BSC with the name of the dog just sitting dormant, and nobody has transacted on it yet. And if that's the case, then you would also have to search through existing coins, but not launched through 4.meme. So it's definitely going to be chaotic. There's also the chance that CZ says he is just messing with everybody and he's actually not going to post the name of the dog, or he's just a picture or so on. But I think the risk is that you have to be ready for it, because assuming he does, it is going to be the most important play possibly of the month so far.
This is my last question. You can answer this short. For my next podcast, I haven't even contacted anyone, but for my next podcast, who do you recommend to have for the Korean audiences to give the word of wisdom?
Oh, that is a good question. If you could get Pao, I'm not sure how often he does AMAs, but it would be a very good podcast to have. And I mentioned this in the Rowdy podcast, but Crypto Ninja is very, very good at narrative trading, and he's very good at trading with size on these type of coins where you need to have conviction. I think that is a skill that I don't have, and it would be a different kind of angle you could see for a lot of these trades for sure. And the story would be interesting as well.
이렇게 오늘 진짜 귀한 분들 모시고서 팟캐스트 제 첫 팟캐스트를 했는데요. 정말 많은 분들이 500분이 넘는 분들이 끝까지 들어주셔가지고 감동이네요. 계속 제가 이걸 할 수 있게끔 좀 용기가 생기는 것 같습니다. Okay, well, we're wrapping up the podcast, my first ever podcast, and it was huge thanks to you. More than 500 people stayed until the last 2 hours to listen to you, Liu, and Cook. Any last thing you'd like to say to the audience?
Oh, yes, just thank you very much for listening, and it was great. The questions were awesome, and I'm going to keep in touch with the next podcast as well. I'll be a recurring visitor for sure.
좋습니다. 다음에 팟캐스트 할 때도 뭐 또 자리를 해주신다고 하시니까 저한테 너무너무 감사한 일이네요. 류 과장님하고 콩님도 마무리 멘트 해주시겠어요?
저도 일단은 진짜 궁금했던 게 많았는데 이번에 물어보면서 많이 해결됐고, 저도 시장에 꽤 락인 한다고 생각을 했는데 이제 아리키 말 들어보니까 더 해야 될 게 많고 더 배워야 될 게 많다고 생각을 해서 오늘 진짜 도움이 많이 됐습니다. 감사합니다.
제가 제일 좋아하는 트레이더가 리큐인데 이렇게 같이 얘기해 볼 수 있어서 너무 영광이고, 그리고 약간 좀 예민할 수도 있는 질문들도 몇 개 있었는데 너무 시원하게 다 상세하게 답변해 주셔서 너무 고마웠고요. 그리고 우리 진행해 주신 험블님 진짜 통역 코트 너무 감탄했습니다. 고생하셨습니다.
저까지 챙겨주시고 감사합니다. Okay, with this,
No problem.
Yeah.
Perfect.
with this, thank you so much for everyone for being here. Thank you for listening. Thanks for listening to me. It took a translation, so it took an extra time, but thank you for sitting tight until the end of the podcast. And until next time, I'm sure we're gonna have Rec in the future, and Liu and Cook as well. And
Yes.
I'll come back with some wholesome content. 들어줘서 너무 감사합니다. 오늘 팟캐스트 이렇게 마무리하도록 하겠습니다.